Players Pick Podcast, Picks and Perspective with Chris Johnson.
Episode 20 with Devin Townsend. Love this dude. Super creative, super funny. You should give him money for stuffed animals.
PG.
And you should listen to his music on the Players Pick Podcast playlist
Pizzazz.
on Spotify.
Personal. Pandemonium. Pants.
So, Players Pick Podcast, episode number 20
It's my favorite.
with Devin Townsend.
Yeah. Hi, Chris.
Hi, Dev.
How's it going, bud?
It's good, man.
We just spent 3.5 hours driving up from San Diego today.
Hey, it's it's got to make up for lost time a little bit. You know?
Yeah. Well, we've known each other now for, what is it? You came and stayed with me, and I met you when you were working in Seattle.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, to start this, I got a story that I'd love to tell.
Okay.
So the first time we stayed together, I stayed at your place when you were in Seattle. And,
That's right.
And I remember this, and I've told this to a bunch of buddies, and I think I even mentioned it to you once, and you looked at me like I was wearing your sweater, but I'll bring it up again. So I was sleeping on your couch, and you lived in this great place in the trees and in a condo, and you woke me up early, and you were like, Dev, wake up. I was like, oh, what, Chris? He goes, dude, there's a place that I go to every morning that I'd love to show you. And I was like, oh, cool. So we get up, and there's mist, and it's early morning, and we walk through all the trees. And then the trees open up, and there's a dock that was out in the water, and it's this beautiful thing. And there's like 2 chairs or 1 chair. I forget what it was, but there was a chair. And you're there, and it was gorgeous. And you're like, I come here in the morning. It's kind of my place that I like to spend time and chill.
Mm-hmm.
And I was right with you, and I was sitting there, and I was like, man, this is beautiful, and it was quiet, and we're just sitting there. And then this thought came into my head that I was like, man, if I had millions of dollars, I would train a dog to be underwater in a glass dome, but not panic, like so not as cruel to the dog. And just once, while you were out there on your own, about 100 yards away from you, I just wanted the dog to come out of the water and just look around and then go back under the water. Because if it only happened once, it would make you crazy. Like you wouldn't know what to do.
No.
You'd be like, dude, a fucking dog came out of the water. And everybody's like, dude, you know?
No, it didn't.
And if we had like everybody involved in the process of making, our buddy go crazy, there's something about that I just find
about
perversely beautiful.
The unity,
yeah.
around
For the rest of your life, you maybe make T-shirts and just sit out there waiting in vigil.
the mysterious dog.
Yeah, dog Jesus rose.
The lake dog rises again.
Dogs us.
That was Lake Sammamish on the east side there in Redmond, I believe. That's what that was.
The mythical dog of the Sammamish.
Well, and you remember very clearly where we went from there, right?
No.
Pumpkin pancakes.
Oh my God, they're so good. That's another thing. It's like in the time that we spent together, your interest in food is something that I have also been very, very happy with, because I love eating, and I love eating good food. It's like a lot of times people are just like, oh, I just like eating.
Yeah, it's food.
They just go to Denny's and get a bucket of eggs.
Food.
But you've just like, no, this place here. But you only eat at this place this one type of scone that's covered in like goose butter or something.
Oh
right?
man, because we went to the Ridgeback Cafe another time, and we did the what would you call it? It's armadillo sauce.
The armadillo sauce.
It was like
so good, and it was a crepe that we had that morning.
Yeah,
and then we went to another place. We had the biscuit with the egg baked inside the biscuit.
Oh,
dude,
yeah,
you're good with that.
I'm a fan of that.
So. Anyway, it's been a good podcast. Let's eat.
Well, and since we're telling stories,
yeah.
I just watched you sound check, and I'll be a little emo here for a second, just because like the moment I heard you playing acoustic guitar, I was like transported back to you teaching me for the ghost thing, and then and it transported me back to being in London when I was like getting all like teary. I was like, oh, I hear Dev's Open Sea thing, and I'm familiar with it more now than I ever was, just because of that experience with you. And And then you did some vocal checking, and I wasn't looking at you, and I heard you do like a little your kind of scream sing check thing, and it reminded me of the very first time I heard your voice on Vi's record. And just like it kind of like I had this little full circle kind of emo like moment, like, oh God, I really love this guy. Like, and I mean, like I'm so glad that I get to be friends with you and
You
for
too.
us to have the thing.
You
know?
too, man. And for those who maybe missed a step there, in 2011, I had finished doing the 4 Devin Townsend project records, basically the 4 ones that comprise what the project was supposed to be in the beginning. And in London, we did 4 nights where first night we did Key, second night Addicted, and then we did Deconstruction and Ghost. And Chris, who had helped me with the acoustic guitars, and then consequently we realized that we like food and like fucking with other people. We thought, well, we should do this. And so Chris came to London, and he, if you look at the DVD of By a Thread, the Ghost Show, the snappy-looking fellow in the back is Chris. So thank you, man.
Yeah, thank you.
But I also feel that at the same time, as we were talking about on the way up here, the industry is small and smaller now than it's ever been. And douchebaggery travels faster than
The nice
H1N1.
Yeah.
So it's pretty quick that after you've been doing it for a while, you're just like, oh yeah, you know that guy too? Yeah, fuck that guy.
Yep. Yeah. It's really easy to get a bad name for yourself.
It is, yeah.
Yeah.
And also, as I am well aware of, it's difficult to get a bad name for yourself and then clear your name.
Correct.
So I feel that it's even our buddy that showed up here tonight that is in a band that we were all sort of friends with each other, and you haven't seen each other in a while. And the first question we ask each other is like, dude, it's been 15 years. Yeah, do I owe you an apology at all?
Did I fuck you up at
did
any
I
point?
do something stupid?
Yeah.
So
well, and it's interesting too because I still draw from our first couple of hangs in Seattle when you first came down to check out guitars.
Yeah.
One of the first things, I don't know if it was in that session or if it was in one of those phone calls or emails, but it was one of the phone calls or something that you had said, well, look, I've been doing this a long time. And you're currently going through trials and tribulations with another company, and you're like, hey, I just got to tell you, like, just don't fuck me over, like, don't basically, like if you can't do something, like, I would love it if you just said no.
yeah.
And I really loved that, and that has been a constant inspiration through the last 10 plus years of doing this gig for all these different companies. Is that I felt the boundary with you, like as an artist, saying, "Please, God, just shoot me straight." Yeah. And then I thought, "Oh well, what an interesting concept, just being truthful and honest, and like maybe just like saying no when you can't do shit, and then do the things when you can." And I attribute honestly that particular bit of advice to like the monumental. If I've had any type of monumental success in my life, it's kind of to. Not that I wasn't going to do that.
No, but I mean, it's funny that it's like we were even talking about it on the way up here, how sometimes you offer advice to people that is coming from a place that they may take it as like, wow, that's really sage. But ultimately, the person who's distributed, it's just because you were broken. Yeah. And you're just like, please don't break me again. Yeah, and it's funny. It's like, wow, that guy said something straight up. And you're just like, wow, my reason for saying that is because I was like, And you know what's funny as well with the shoot straight thing is as simple as it sounds to say, hey, just say no if you can't do it.
Yeah.
Which we both agree is like, it works really well.
Oh, it's amazing.
However, if as an artist or as an individual, your lineage is based in people pleasing, which for me was a big part of my subconscious agenda. And I think when it came to bands, when it came to relationships, when it came to expectations from the audience, there's a big part of me that was, I think I had a lot of my self-worth invested in whether or not other people approved. And as we even discussed on the drive up as well, when I was young, my role in the family was, you could do no wrong. You were kind of like the golden boy. And so when I finally, did a bunch of acid and fucking went bananas, and then my mother was just like, "Whoa, really?"
Apparently, you can do some wrong.
Well, that was a great thing to actually learn for me. Is that not only can I do wrong and publicly and in a humiliating fashion, but also the ability to sort of come back from that and the tenacity and the friends that are around me that are like, yeah, you were an asshole, but it's cool because I know fundamentally, it was a mistake.
Right.
I think what came from that as well is something that really has benefited my work over the past decade, where it's as much as I do care whether or not people like it, because you ultimately want to share something that resonates with the truth, with your artistic motivations. As an artist, you have a moment of emotional significance that is clearly beyond you. Mm-hmm. And then through your bias and through your work and through everything that you do, you try and represent that in a way that, although maybe people don't like the aesthetic because, it's a really individual thing. It's like, well, this middle-class white Canadian male who's had this, and this experience and likes stuffed animals and puppets. That's through that filter, hopefully there's a moment of truth. And by resonating with that, then people are resonating with something that is beyond us. Mm. And I still care if the truth is in there. Mm-hmm. Yet, there's also a significant aspect of it now where I'm like, I can't spend that energy trying to please others, right?
Well, there's only so much to go around, especially the older we get.
Right?
So you have to choose how you use your fucks.
Yeah, choose how you use your fucks.
Yeah, like
so good,
right? Like how much fuck are you going to give, and in which direction? Like, I love one of the more new agey book guys that I don't know if we've talked about, Dr. Joe Dispenza, but he talks. One of his coins is like, where your attention goes, your energy flows, and so. If we are always diverting our energy to, let me help, I want you to like me, like we're spending so much energy to do something that just really can't ultimately be done in a lot of parts of our social interactions, and it's just like very momentary aspects of what we can put Band-Aids on instead of like reserving the energy for the things that we can affect, which are usually our own personal, experience, like how I perceive what you give me, like how can I change my perspective to better suit the situation that's not necessarily trying to please you, but like just using it wisely. Like, okay, I'm done now, and I'm going to move on. And
it's interesting because that concept resonates with something I had talked about with a lady at a hospital at one point. I think like lots of us, I don't know about yourself, but I can't imagine that you haven't had the thought, but a lot of people that are sort of interested in these sorts of existential bullshitteries. I question sometimes if altruism is ultimately just an extension of selfishness, and if humans fundamentally are capable of true altruism, or if it always has an agenda on some level, like I contribute to the charity because I want to be seen as the person who is contributing, or I help that person who's in need by giving them $10 because it makes me feel like I'm closer to God or whatever it is, right?
Sometimes I think it's, for me, I would just pipe in and say sometimes it's both. I give $10 because I'm like, it's going to feel good to give this guy $10, but also just because I try to practice, like, what would it feel like to be on the corner and not have $10? Mm-hmm. Oh, well, if somebody blessed me with $10, that would be dope. Mm-hmm. And so, I mean, both kind of almost can be true, I guess.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I think up to the point where I had sort of articulated in my mind that was actually a question. Mm-hmm. I think I was projecting my own lack of self-esteem onto the equation, and it was actually a buddy that said, I think if you typically use self-deprecation as like a defense mechanism or what have you, a lot of times I think you can talk yourself out of the fact that you've done something nice for somebody by explaining it away as being fundamentally selfish. Mm-hmm. But it was in that hospital actually where I saw a nurse, like a lady who was exhausted, that was taking care of somebody with clearly no overtly selfish agenda.
Wow.
And whether or not there was something else going below the surface or however far you want to follow that rabbit hole, I found it quite relieving to actually see a human being doing something for somebody else for just the sake that they feel compassion for them, right?
Right. So, yeah, it's awesome to see an example.
Yes.
Right?
Yes. And I mean, I think it also very clearly displayed how far up my own ass I feel like I can go, left to my own devices. I saw an article in The Onion that I thought was great, where it was like psychologist relates all of human experience to his own trip. You know, he's like 9 out of 10 psychologists think that their wife was just a shrieking hyena. You know what I mean? So it was nice to have that sort of laid bare, right? It's like all these steps are good for my creative process for sure.
Right.
So players pick. How many? You're 20 into this now.
Yeah, this is number 20.
Cool.
Yeah, you know, I like, as we've kind of discussed a little bit about it, one of the things that it's kind of interesting to ask this question, I find that nobody's really been asked this question.
Okay.
And that's just like I'm looking for origin stories like about you as a player, but through your guitar pick.
Okay.
What were your first memories? Who gave your first one? Is there anybody that influenced you along the way?
Mm-hmm. I think I remember the first guitar pick I had was with a guitar that a kid at school covertly tried to sell me because he didn't want to play guitar, but his parents had paid $800 for it. So he just gave it to me out the back of his door one day, and it came with this shitty paper thin, you know, the type that
A celluloid or something?
I don't know. It's like it was not, much thicker than a piece of cardboard.
Okay.
Right, and really like flappy and everything.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking at the time, oh, that's what a guitar pick is? Huh. That seems voraciously uncool. Because I remember trying a riff, and it's just like, you know, it's like a limp dick.
Yep.
And
Can't do a whole lot with it.
From there, my dad had finger picks for the banjo. You know, the one on the thumb and the one on each fingers. And again, I tried to play Judas Priest songs with that to questionable ends. And then the first actual pick that I think I purchased is the same gauge that I typically use now. It was the green Tortex .73, and it's the typical pick shape, the teardrop.
Well, the green one is the 88.
Oh, it is?
Because and this is the thing. Remember,
this is correct. You're right.
There was the thing where you did play 88 forever, and then we accidentally sent you the 73s, and you're like, oh, I kind of like the 73s.
I just got used to it. And now I got the 1 millimeter, and now I'm used to that. So,
Yeah.
But it was the green one, so you're right. That's the .88?
88, yeah.
Okay. So that was it, and I remember playing that, but I didn't put a whole lot of thought into what it was about a pick that either inspired me or didn't. I just thought that the first one was like a write-off.
Sure.
And the second one was cool, but it wasn't like a fetish. You know, I didn't think, okay, well, with this pick I shall travel. It was just the thing that you use to hit the strings.
Yeah.
But when it became a fetish in a way for me is I went through maybe 3 years of my guitar playing in the formative years where I was the guy that my identity was that I was the guy that used copper picks.
Oh.
So there was a music store that you could buy 3 picks at a time for $6 or something. It was like really expensive.
Wow.
And they were these copper picks that, for whatever reason, I just really liked. And I think in hindsight, I liked it because it was different.
Sure.
Rather than me having the chops or the skill to utilize it in a way that sounded different than the paper thin one I used in the beginning.
Yeah.
And in fact, I remember recently I asked you if I could try out the Phil Collins ones,
Yep.
which were brass.
Right.
Because I remember that was like my thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I quickly realized that it is no longer my thing.
Yep.
But that was the first real pick experience that I remember as being like a definitive part of my guitar playing growth.
So from the 88 regular shaped picks, you went into the copper picks. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And like, how long do you think you...
About 3 years, and I tried a couple different gauges. And they had them really thin, and then when they broke, you just had like a shattered piece of metal between your thumb, which was
amazing.
No bueno. But and they oxidized as well, which is
got
gross.
Some patina, like type of look.
Well, it just looks like an old penny.
Ah,
And as a side note, I have 2 things that I can't stand, and I don't know if it's. And when I say that, I mean in terms of like phobias.
okay.
These aren't phobias to the point where they're immobilizing, but they're phobias to the point where it's like I do whatever I can to avoid them. Mm-hmm. One of which is coins, like change money, and the other is jewelry of any sort. Like, I absolutely loathe touching jewelry.
Wow. Like because the metal jewelry?
And I think I played both of those things back to my mother had a massive purse, like this void that just things would go into. And when you're kids, you didn't have a lot of money.
Sure.
And she would have a piece of gum, and between my sister and I, she would break the gum in half and then put the other half of gum at the bottom of this, like, all the weird schmuck that just like ends up accumulating in any sort of mom's purse.
Yeah.
And she would pull this half a piece of gum out with like a piece of an earring stuck into it and a penny stuck to it, and she's like, "You want some gum?" And I remember thinking to myself, like, fuck no.
Yeah.
And then when I gave up on my copper picks, it was because all of a sudden I was like, wait a minute, this is a penny.
You're like, I don't like
Pennies.
change.
It's the smell. It's everything about it, right?
Yeah.
To this day, like, I end up giving exorbitant amounts of tip to somebody if the product is $1.01.
Just give it all away. You're
It's like,
don't want any of
it's
it.
$2.
Yeah.
As far as I'm concerned.
Now it's yours.
Yeah, it's your problem.
Wow.
Yeah.
So then, was there from the copper picks? Where did it go?
I don't think I remember. I think I used whatever it could. There was a gray Fender one, if memory serves, that was ribbed for her pleasure.
Like a nylon style.
That's what it was. It was nylon, yeah. And it was a little thinner, but not too bad. It was gray, so whatever that gauge was. And then I think it wasn't long before I decided that bass picks were where it was at for me. And ever since I've been playing, not only professionally, but in the formative years of trying to become an active professional musician, I use the big pizza slice picks.
Yeah, the triangles.
The triangles.
Yeah.
And I like them for a lot of reasons. I like them because they're substantial, and I've always gauged quality of things based on whether or not they feel substantial. It's the same reason I like heavy guitars.
Yeah.
Someone gives me a, it's like, oh, you should try this guitar. It's like 12 grand and it's ultralight, and I'm just like, I'm gonna break it.
Yeah.
And it's same thing. It's like the relationships in my life are all long term, and I think the people who are in my life are resilient people. It's the same thing. I'm like, what? That's gonna break you? Really?
Oh,
Dude, I don't know how much we're gonna have to talk about anymore. So someone's like, well, here's this guitar. You gotta be really careful. And I'm just like, it's not for me, bud.
that's actually a really good. I feel similar in that way. Like if it's too dainty,
Yep, totally.
maybe not so much.
So the guitars that I have designed with frameless, you can put them on the floor. You're not going to break the headstock. They weigh between 8 and 10 pounds. They've got an Evertune on there. It's
Extra
like
weight.
You can essentially drag them behind the tour bus to the next gig, and you'll still be in tune, and it'll be all right.
You're telling me that because you made the guitar extra thick, that it can, even though it has the kickback on the headstock, you can lay it on the floor and it doesn't put weight on the headstock.
Exactly. And that's the whole idea, because I like the sound of a Les Paul Custom, and that was kind of the idea going into like the Stormbender thing, which is a terrible name, but I'm going to say it with a straight face from here on in. And to make a guitar that had that set neck, ebony fretboard, mahogany body, maple cap, that particular radius on the tilt of the headstock, all that contributes to a sound that with a heavy tone sounds to me what I'm looking for. It's really thick, and the harmonics line up in a way that I just love. So, but Les Pauls just kind of look dumb on me, and and when I put the guitar on the ground while I'm recording, which I'm going to do, because expediency in the studio is more important to me than options.
Sure.
I'm just like, dude, I want it to be in tune. If I put it on the ground, I don't want to be careful with it. If I've got an idea, if I've got a creative flow, I want the quickest way to point B. And I broke the headstock on a Flying V. I broke the headstock on a Les Paul because I put it on the ground, and then I go to take a piss and I step on the guitar. So with the frameless, I'm trying to think, okay, I'm going to piss. I'm going to put it on the ground. So let's just think ahead on this.
Just fix it ahead of time.
And the thing with the tri-picks is exactly the same principle. I can grab it in a way that feels substantial, Plus, it's got 3 corners, and
They're all equal. Yeah.
The one thing, and we've discussed this, and it's still on my mind, and at some point, it's going to somebody's going to make this.
Yeah.
My favorite picks are they've got wear. So a lot of times, with the what are they called? Triangles? Is that just it?
Yeah, they call them a try.
So they're tumbled in talc, and the edges become rounded and smooth, and it's a nice new fresh pick. That's not the sound that I want. The one that I want is when the edges are frayed enough that when you play on a clean sound, it adds grit to the tone.
Yeah.
And I have, thanks to you, many picks. But when I go to record, when I go to gig, I go through my laundry bucket that my wife very kindly has set out just for picks.
Oh, nice.
And there's picks there from 30 years worth of being an idiot. You know what I mean? ESP picks and like ones from years ago. And I'll go through that and I will test each one of them and try and find, because between a triangle pick, that's 6 sides that potentially can give me that sound.
Right.
And when I find that, I will fetishize that pick until I inevitably lose it. But we've discussed, well, how do you try and make that? How do you replicate that? We tried it without tumbling them.
Yeah.
My thought at first was like, well, maybe we can find some sort of material that has some sort of grit built into it. But then I think that becomes there's a lack of control to that. So you're going to find maybe you just have like a shitty, gritty pick.
I think we're going to mold it. That's, I think, what was going to happen ultimately.
I think the shitty gritty would be a great name for it.
Shitty gritty.
Yeah.
Yeah, Dev's shitty gritty. Come
The
on
SG.
down. Come on down. Get some SG. Yeah, I think
What's that stand for, guys? Super good.
super good.
Super guitaru.
I love it.
Yeah.
No, that makes sense to me that because I actually saved one of the picks that you gave me from that, and I showed it to Jimmy. And he's like, "Yeah, I don't know, we're gonna get to it." You know? Like,
of course, yeah, right.
But now that he's been able to do some of this stuff, like we were talking, I mean,
Yeah.
he's done it for Jeff Loomis recently. Didn't put the grit on it necessarily, but was able
Yeah.
to mold a Tortex style pick into an Ultim mold, which like emulates that same like type of edge. But what I think we're going to end up trying to do, at least, is there's a certain Jazz 3 that we do that Dunlop does that is it's the 2.0, and they put a texture on the inside of the mold. It's kind of an even texture.
Yeah, that still would work.
But I think it could lend itself to your thing in the right.
The closest that I've found in a production pick is the Altex stuff.
Yeah.
Because Tortex, I've used it forever. And it is, they're smooth, and they break down quicker than a lot of, like the Altex or like the Flow or whatever.
Sure.
But ultimately, the Altex has got more of a not grit. It sticks to the strings more so than gliding off of it, and that gives a good heavy sound. And for me, that's the closest I've gotten to a stock pick. However, the ones that we made that I'm currently using have a color in them, because the typical Altex thing is that sort of opaque amber sort of look. Yeah. But then when we put the color into it, the thing that I liked about the Altex
it
changed. So it's ongoing, but even at that, with the Altex, I just shred the shit out of them, and then eventually I got one that does that, right?
Right.
So,
okay.
Yeah.
To be continued. We'll work on this. I promise. That's good stories, though. I think about the heft because you and my brother is the same way. It has to be heavy.
Totally.
It has to be substantial for it to for it to register as having value.
Not only value, but truly.
Yeah.
But also psychologically, when I'm playing, like a lot of the music that I write, it's orchestrated. There's choral stuff. There's a lot of moving parts. But the fundamental part of what I do is octaves and fifths. Because the intervals that I want to layer on that are complicated to the point where sonically there's a lot of information going on in the upper mids. So when I'm writing riffs, they are really knuckle dragging. Even if it's amidst things that are very complicated, the root of what I'm trying to do is only typically octaves and fifths. And again, with the construction of the guitar, with everything that I do, it's about trying to get those octaves and fifths to harmonically resonate in a way that there's no shuddering. By doing that, I can layer orchestral elements, vocal elements, keyboard elements on top of that, and it occupies a completely different frequency range, and it allows me to mix it in a way that is more open. And often I get tagged with the whole wall of sound thing.
Sure.
But a lot of that for me is just because I'm only working with these two speakers, and it's a pain in the ass because what I'm trying to crowbar that into those two speakers, that's what's going to happen. You get that big thing. But, the next step with the Empath record is I'm doing it in surround, and I found that by doing that, it's a lot easier to sort of distribute that harmonic information. However, when it comes to the guitar, I want the riffs to be super fucking heavy, and I want them to be simple, and I want them to be not fast. I want them to be like quarter notes and just like caveman style thing. Substantial.
Yeah.
So psychologically, the weight of a guitar appeals to me because it seems like it's heavy. And so playing a heavy instrument makes me feel in a very tangible way that what I'm playing is affected by what I'm feeling.
Okay.
Yep.
That's a great explanation.
I'm a great explainer.
Yeah, you explanate well. Thanks.
For the explainer?
Yeah, for the
We should get shirts made.
explanator.
Yeah, that man is full of explanatives.
Explanatives.
Yeah.
Well, explain me this.
Go. Riddle me this.
Yeah, Batman.
Yeah.
Bat Dev.
Bat Dev.
I like to. We've already been there talking about things and perspectives and stuff. But like that's another thing. You have quite the experience now. I mean, you have had experience for a long time, but like as a world traveler, you've recently been to India. You've done gigs all over the place, and I just wonder at times, like through that crazy schedule and through those a vast array of experiences, like what have you learned, and how have you kept yourself together through all of this?
Well, first off, I appreciate the assumption that I'm together.
Well, I mean, only that you're in one piece currently.
Okay, that's
physically.
fair enough.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you. I think a lot of it has to do with the objectives. And what I have been trying to represent through interviews or opportunities like this is that the work that I do is very separate from the music, which doesn't bode well for an industry that is looking to categorize artists. Like, okay, well, this guy does prog metal, or this does new age, or whatever. But my objectives as an individual have been, for as long as I can remember, and even before I was aware of what it was that I was trying to do, has been rooted in self-actualization. That's the goal. How do you become who you are in a way that when you speak your truth creatively, artistically, you're not hesitating? And that plays into improvisation, that plays into onstage banter, that plays into all sorts of things. And the process of unraveling the baggage that I have accumulated, and we all accumulate,
Totally.
has been such that each period of my creative work, the albums act as a thesis of a particular period of time that in hindsight I can reflect on what was it about that particular period that I needed to solve.
Wow.
So when strapping existed at the time, and it wasn't until hindsight I was able to recognize that my fear of confrontation was such that overt displays of anger I felt incredibly threatened by. So my reaction to that and my defense was to actualize my anger that has come from multiple different places, whether or not it's like sexually or through my initial experiences in the music industry. I thought at the time that, and I was clear in my mind that, no, I'm just angry. Therefore, I'm going to utilize this particular period in my life where everything clearly resonates with this color, with this tonality, with this name, with these people, with this sound. And that became a thesis, if I look at it that way, that lasted 4 or 5 records. And it wasn't until it was done and it started to become successful that I was able to see that your inability to understand anger based on, in a lot of ways, during your upbringing, your parents were affected by anger. Like their parents were, there was alcohol in the family, and there was things, even though it was loving,
Sure.
that overt displays of emotion were considered not only to be undesirable, but also a threat.
Oh.
So if we were angry overtly, if there was anything like that, it was immediately like the kibosh is put on it. Like, you don't do that. It was met with resounding anger. So as somebody who from birth has been very sensitive, the loophole that I found is that you could display those emotions if it was artistic,
Right.
if it was music, because on some level it negates its like what it actually is. So I found that all things got hardwired to that. And by the time strapping was done, I recognized that my inability to recognize anger as being something other than an aberration, my inability to recognize that anger is a part of the human condition and my function. And as an artist, unless I'm able to make peace with that, all it's going to do is fill me with fear. Strapping became this mirror for that, and it just drew it to me. And I just was surrounded by angry things.
Wow.
And then when it became popular, I started recognizing, like download. I remember being on stage, and the show was great. And I remember thinking, if any emotional outburst becomes popular and people see it as being a way to generate income, it rationalizes that type of behavior to the point where you become a figurehead for it.
Yep.
And so I was like, I can't do this anymore. And people were saying, well, what are you going to do next? And ultimately, I remember thinking, and even to this point, I'm like, well, what I do is of no consequence. The music is this transient thing that a lot of it, like you listen back, it's like, that sounds like shit. That song's not that great. It's done on ADAT or what have you.
Sure.
But it's the process that's important. And it's only been over the past maybe 5 to 7 years that I've recognized that the idea of actualizing myself as an entity is ultimately what my goals are. And there is a type of regulator, I think emotionally, spiritually, and creatively, that gets attached to that process, where as you're willing to experiment and as you're willing to fail, it starts becoming clear what each level of the subtlety of being an artist, how that reacts to your environment. And if what you're trying to create, ultimately, if your intention is to create destruction, I mean, fair play, as long as you are committed to that.
Right.
And for me, when I finally recognized that my intention is to try and help rather than hinder, these things that I have been afraid of become clear to me. It's like, well, you need to experience this. You need to do this. You need to go through this. You need to try this. You need to know how you feel. It's like touching the electric muffin. You know what I mean? It's like, ow, 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 ow. So the way that I keep myself centered at this point is because there's a true north, I think, in my psychology that knows what it is that I want to participate in on a spiritual, on a personal level.
Yeah.
However, that process, for me, for whatever reason, it's imperative that I know for sure how I feel about something. So for years I was vegetarian, right?
Yep.
And then vegan and all these things. And then I started thinking about, like, why? Why are you this? And my first reaction is like, well, this is what a spiritual person is supposed to do. So I was like, well, fuck it. Start eating meat. Like, see how you feel about it.
Right.
You know? Like, and I remember I got a couple of friends that work at this Buddhist center in Vancouver. And it was funny because a couple people who I know who are vegan came up and said, well, we know you're vegan. And this is a while back, by the way.
Sure.
And they said, we're really happy to have you on the team and all this. And I was like, man, I just ate a rhino's ass for dinner.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I went to China and had a pig's anus, and they were so disappointed. And then, but when I was talking to these people at the Buddhist Center, they're like, oh, that's the best thing you can possibly do. Not because of the eating meat, but just knowing.
Right.
Because if your faith in what you should or shouldn't do is based in fear of being a bad boy, or like, you know, like, oh, the reason why I'm whatever, I abstain from this and that is because I don't want to be punished. I don't want to go to hell, or whatever your metaphor for that sort of suffering is, you know what I mean?
Sure.
Then I think you're never actually going to get any semblance of truth.
Agreed.
So my work is about the process. And we talked about this at lunch. A lot of times people are very critical of what I do because they think it's like goofy. They're like, you know, we want to like what you do, but I don't get it. You know what I mean? I see it, and it's like you got stuffed animals, but I know you can scream, and I know you can, you know, do shredding guitar, and it's like, so why can't you just like pull it together and quit being goofy and just, you know, rock? And I'm like, because it's got fuck all to do about the music. It's like, I need to be who I am, and the funny part of it for me is that after doing this for 30 years, I have a career. So on some level, I feel the biggest problem that I have, which also helps with keeping myself centered, is each record that comes out, I have to rationalize something that's intuitive. People say, why did you make, you know, why do you have the puppets? And I'm like, I don't fucking know, because I thought it was funny.
Yeah,
you
puppets are fun.
It's fun.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, God, okay, let me think about it. Okay, so it's probably a metaphor that's based on this and that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And also, the last thing I'll say about this, which is surprising considering the amount of talk I do, I'm surrounded by people that keep me in check. You know, I've got good friends. A lot of my relationships are long-term.
Yeah.
And, you know, if I am being a douche, I've got people that will tell me that I'm being a douche.
It's important.
It is important.
Well, and part of what I hear too is that the industry and it's funny enough, like we're supposed to be artists, right? And we're supposed to be a whole group of, you know, people in the industry that are supporting the arts and self-expression, right? But people forgot somewhere along the lines that isn't necessarily a serious thing. It doesn't need to be a 100% serious thing all the time, right? Like from at least from what I get from this scenario is that you're sincere with your efforts. You're sincere with what you have to offer, and you say, "This is what I got." And sometimes it includes puppets, motherfucker.
Well, that's it, and it's funny as well because a lot of times people interpret what I'm doing as being flippant, or being like, "Oh, you're doing that because you're just being silly."
Yeah.
However, what I would counter that with is, I think a big part about being a human is recognizing the fundamental absurdity of, you know, this dichotomy between figuring out string theory and quantum mechanics and all whatever heady pursuits might be, you know, the catchphrase of the day, versus the fact that we're just like lizard brain, like boobies, you know what I mean? And it's like anybody who expresses to me that they're not, I'm just like, oh, you're so full of shit. Like, just it's okay to be fucking dumb. And anybody, again, who in my estimation claims that human beings are anything other than just ridiculous are either trying to, like Princess Bride style, sell you something, or they figure they've got it all worked out. And anybody who tells me that they've got the answers is, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So what I tend to do with that is I tend to go down an avenue that started when I was very young of needing, I have a compulsion to express myself on a fundamental emotional level. Yet, once I go further down it, I'm just like, oh, you're so full of shit. And then at that point, and people have said, oh, well, you sabotage the work by putting like farts in it or puppets or whatever.
Sure.
And I'm like, that's part of the process in a lot of ways. It's hopefully comes across as an awareness of, amidst the, oh my God, the infinite mosaic of the eternal present and, you know, and love and death and all this, it's just like, yeah, we're just a bunch of shit and fucking primates.
But also poop jokes, also farts.
Yeah, and also there's a certain part of me that just, I like the fact that some people get bummed by it. You know what I mean?
Sure.
I think that's all right.
Yeah, it's totally all right.
And but the second thing I would say about that is, I think it's a loophole for me to express things that are psychologically really intense for me if I wrap it in a metaphor that is lighthearted.
Right.
Because otherwise, you get the Bono thing or the Michael Stipe thing, where you're like, what I'm saying is of such significance that everybody should pay attention to it. And it reminds me of that story where Bono was playing in Ireland. You hear that?
No.
So he was on stage, and 20,000 people or whatever. It's like in his home, and he's got everybody to be quiet. He's like, everybody be quiet, and he starts clapping, right? And then he's like, every time I clap my hands, a child in Africa dies. And somebody in the back's like, quit fucking clapping then.
It's all your fault, Bono.
And then I can imagine backstage, the rest of the guys in the band just like, you know what I mean? But I think you run that risk, dude. You run that risk because we all have these experiences that are super profound.
Yeah. Yeah.
And to like express that as if, you're Jesus is so fucking arrogant, man. You know what I mean? Like,
no, that's where I'm getting off at, or I just apply it to the serious versus sincere. Like, I feel like there's a big chunk of the world that takes everything very, very serious. And
For sure.
Oh, this is serious. This is serious business.
Yeah, right, man.
You better fall in line. You should stop doing the poop jokes. Like, let's get busy, Dev. And it's like, but that's only a part of the story of our human condition. It's a part, seriousness and kind of being steadfast and expanding upon all the big things. Great,
for sure,
fine, part of the story.
Totally. However, I also would say that a lot of the people that are critical of my work for not being serious enough, when they're in private, they're the same as you and I.
Yeah.
So my process, which we talked about a second ago, if it is truly about uncovering who you are and calling yourself on your own shit, to not include who you are in private in your public persona, it doesn't seem to be in line with that. It seems to be disingenuous if your objective is what mine clearly seems to be.
Right.
And as devil's advocate, that's not for everybody.
Yeah, that's not everybody's objective.
And also the bias in which I write from, like I say, middle class, white Canadian male with experiences in this, kids getting older, whatever. There's going to be a certain amount of people that listen to it and be like, I just don't like it.
Yeah.
Which is great.
Yeah.
But I think that if it, long-windedly, how do you keep yourself centered? It's ultimately taking the piss out of myself because I recognize that ultimately the music is a byproduct of a process that my personality is independent of.
Yeah, that's great. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's what I've noticed this. I mean, and not that it wasn't all that obvious anyway, but I noticed that as you kind of finished strapping and you did Ziltoid.
Yeah,
I mean, it's a very like, and you just kind of framed it really well about how strapping was this a way to put the anger out here outside of you in a way and say, oh, frame it in a way that I can really dive into it, let it go, scream and yell and make the big chunky riffs and make everybody go crazy, inviting chaos, and then realize, oh, shit, like, okay, that was interesting. I manifested, I was able to exercise and manifest this thing, not exactly in line with my ultimate goals. Okay, what's next? Like, okay, so took the dreads off and the puppet got it. Mm-hmm. So then the puppet got out in front of you, and you were able to say, okay, now this is the other journey. This is part of my transformation journey, and you cloaked it in metaphor and
totally
twisted it up, and we all laughed, and we're like, Ziltoid rules,
sure.
Like,
which is great.
Yeah,
but I think, and I really appreciate the awareness of that. Thank you.
Yeah,
because a lot of times people are just like, what the fuck are you doing, dude? But to me, because my objectives are dead serious, there's nothing funny about it. There's nothing funny about it. It's like it's my trip. So Ziltoid, as ridiculous of a concept as it was, if you look at it from the point of view of, okay, strapping, I'm so afraid of anger that I'll be angrier than everybody. That'll keep them away. And then I was like, well, that didn't work. Oh. And then I became afraid of the creative compulsion within me that manifests that angry music. So in order for me to understand it, I felt that if I could objectify it in something that seems as juvenile as that compulsion actually is, if that inability to face confrontation is truly rooted in something that's like childish, then the manifestation of it, like if you exercise it and turn it into an object, of course it's going to be childish.
Right.
Like Ziltoid, it's not like, what's it going to be, like a serious, no, he's a kid. He's like this goofy thing.
Yeah.
So by doing that and gluing my hair to it, which my mom was like, that's super healthy, great. I was able to look at it and say, oh, I'm not actually afraid of this, but I see what it represents to me. And it wasn't until Empath that I was able to say, okay, well, in order to get past your fear of that creative compulsion, which clearly resonates with you, you have to face it. And, I think it's, as we're talking, it's really funny as well because every now and then, and it's much less than I used to in the past, I make the mistake of reading comments, about who I am and what I say and all this. And one thing that has been good for me recently as well, where people are like, oh, it's a pretentious thing, or you're very pompous as a result of like speaking as much as you do, and I gave it some thought, and then recently I came to the conclusion, I'm like, fuck no, I'm not. Fuck you.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, I talk a lot, but it's because I'm fucking asked. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like the whole. I've spent 25 years of having every moment of this creative process. I remember doing fucking tons of mushrooms and then doing a whole day of interviews that still haunt me. Because people are like, yeah, remember that? You're the crazy guy. And I'm like, I was so fucking high, dude. Like, holy shit.
Can we just not talk about that?
But you
now?
can't.
Like,
it's there.
Yeah.
And, and Bori, the guy who runs Blabbermouth, I lived with him in L.A.
Oh, shit.
Roommates, right? And I love Bori.
Yeah.
And I see it every time I'll say something stupid. It's like Blabbermouth, Devin says, kids should be illegal. And there's a picture of me with my finger in my nose because I know Bori's like going through the internet trying to find the most brutal picture of you.
Yeah.
Right? And it's like, but because he's a buddy and because we've been through all this stuff together, I mean, the only thing I can think of is like, yeah, I guess I did say that.
Yeah.
But going through this thing with you, because we know each other, I also realize that there's been a certain amount of progress now where I'm like, man, if I bug you, if what I do and my trip and my music and the reason why I have fucking puppets and all this stuff, if it bugs you, why are you listening to me?
Yeah.
Just don't.
Yeah.
There's a million other bands out there that would die for your attention. You know what I mean? Just please get fucked.
That's
what I mean?
That's a really interesting modern thing. I don't know. I can't speak to what it was like before the internet, even though I remember before the internet, we just didn't have chat boards. So if I didn't want to go to a show, I didn't go to a show.
Right.
If I didn't want to listen to a guy's music, I didn't buy it.
Yeah.
I didn't subject myself to it. But here we pass links around so much, and there's a lot of things where people just feel like, oh, you know what? I got to tell this guy or tell his fans that this is shit because he should have did 4 more of those chugs and and his guitar is ugly and he smells bad.
Well, you read that interview too?
Yeah.
No. But here, devil's advocate, because I think that's important with these sorts of things. When I was a kid, we used to get together. Beav.
I love Beef.
Yeah, Beef. He played bass in DTP, and I've known him since I was 12 or 13. So we were kids together.
Yeah.
And we used to jam in my basement, in my garage. And I remember we used to write these fictional things like to bands. Like we're going to send letters to Rat and Motley Crue and tell them they fucking suck.
Right.
Like, that's what we did. And we thought it was hilarious. We're like, we're going to send these mails to these bands and just be like, fuck you, right? And we never did. But at the time, we didn't perceive that action as being like malicious.
Right.
We just thought it was hilarious. Like, a guy with the funny hair, like, fuck him.
I think that's fine. I think that you write things that you don't necessarily always send, but we're in a place in our modern era where it's too easy to be malicious and to be kind of off the cuff, like asshole-ic. Not to say that, hey, everybody's entitled to their voice, and I'm all about the devil's advocate.
Sure.
Totally. I'll hear it all day long.
Well, I still got more to go on it.
But people could be a little kinder to each other. That's all.
For sure. However, I think the mechanism's the same. What I'm saying with that is the intent that we had as kids were based in being childish, and we didn't have the means to put it out. So my devil's advocate position on this is how much of what you and I perceive as being malicious is actually based in that same mechanism that is just kids being like douches, right?
Right.
And I also think it's. I'll stop there, but let's go on.
That's okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's good. I don't know. I was just thinking we should
We-
talk. Go ahead.
Okay, no, go.
No.
I gotta pee,
You got to pee?
but not yet. So
Tell me about what you've been listening to. Is there any rad stuff, artist, guitarist, non-guitarist, that might not be something that people know that you listen to or that you just think should be shouted out?
I recently spent $500 on a pair of headphones.
Nice.
That I debated for a month or so.
Sennheiser?
No, the new Sony Bluetooth noise canceling headphones.
Oh.
I had the Bose ones before, but they were wired in.
Okay.
But I didn't realize until I got there they are over there. I didn't realize until I tried noise canceling headphones what it does for me in a social environment. It gives me a room. It gives me a little bubble that I can exist in. And because of the amount of traveling, the amount of flying, the amount of being around people that I just don't want to hear their conversation, yet we're in close quarters, those headphones for me are indispensable. And on tour, I have them around my neck or in close proximity basically at all times. And what I listen to on them is almost exclusively, other than when I exercise, in which I like, Five Finger Death Punch or
Nice.
Motorhead or things like things that make me feel like, yeah, this is exercise music. It gives me adrenaline, right? And it sounds good or whatever. But other than that, I listen to almost exclusively down-tempo, electronic, instrumental chill.
Nice.
And what I listen to, I have no idea because I just have the recommendations from Spotify. Sure. Every day it gives me a new selection of thing. If I like it, I save it. I've got, like the other day I have, I was setting up my gear. There's tons of people. And the light guy here, Jimmy, comes and goes, well, what are you listening to? And so, and what it was just Tibetan singing bowls.
Nice.
Bowl, B-O, because singing balls would be great.
Balls.
But that was what it was. It's just meditative, sort of chill stuff. But in the morning, like we talked earlier, I mean, morning music for me has been taiko dive for years.
Yeah.
And but it's just I've got a whole selection of music that all kind of sounds the same. And for me, music acts as like a soundtrack to my day. And I like music to be in the background. I like it to be nondescript, and I like it to act almost like a watercolor. And if there was one record that I would recommend to your listeners that I've listened to without exaggeration, maybe 2,000 times in my life, is by an artist called Rapoon, and the album is called Darker by Light. And I have listened to that record for 15 years. Wow. At one point, I'd listen to it all day, So that's one.
Okay.
I had a good time recently with a bunch of the Hammock material. John Hopkins, I love what he does. Chiasmos Blurred, I thought that was a great album.
Great record.
All India Radio, I really enjoyed that. But it all has a similar kind of trajectory. There's like a native flute player who, it's like sort of the cedar flute with a lot of reverb, which I've liked for years. But I like music that I don't recognize and just acts as like a constant sort of chill environment for me.
Yeah, it probably helps with the nerves and the overall your overstimulation of all the other music and creating the heavy stuff and
yes, sir,
and all the constant barrage of people like me asking you questions.
No, but it's different.
Pee.
I mean, it's like I don't have to pee now. I do now that I'm reminded of it. Damn you! But I think my hypersensitivity, the same thing that compelled me to make music, is the same thing that recently, specifically after the demise of my last band, I had to look at seriously as how do I manage this? Because if I don't find a mechanism to incorporate this into a life that, okay, it's inevitable that I'm going to feel this way. My job requires me being public. My job requires me to rationalize my work, be in front of thousands of people. And if you don't have the ability to not absorb the energy of people who you're surrounding yourself with, you become a martyr for your work. And I've got zero interest in that.
Right.
So meditation, physical exercise, those two things on the road. So 5 days a week, I go to the gym. I take 2 days off. Every day, every morning, meditation. And in the night, if I've got some sort of place I like to clear the day energetically. The headphones work for me. For example, there's no place to do meditation a lot of times on the bus or anything, but those headphones have a mode where it's completely silent.
Oh, nice.
So I can find a corner somewhere and I can spend 35 or 40 minutes. And between those two aspects, the energetic requirements of being a professional musician, specifically one that specializes in like heavy or brutal music, is something that you can maintain.
That's awesome. Do you have a certain kind of meditation that you incorporate?
Yeah.
Is it TM or is it something else?
No, it's I go to these silent retreats as well, like where it's like a week of just meditation and quiet, and they're really fucking hard, right? And the type that I do, it's I guess it's kind of mantra based, but a lot of it has to do with I don't even know the style. I don't even know what it's called, but it's a specific one to this
Lineage
place
or
that
whatever.
I go. Yeah.
Okay.
But a lot of it has to do with being aware of the energy centers, I think, in my body, and recognizing which ones of them need to be nurtured during that day. So a lot of times, even on the tour, I'll go through different colors. You know what I mean? Like one day is red, orange, yellow, green.
Kind of chakra style.
Very much.
Yeah.
And by doing that, it draws my attention to the parts of me that require that type of attention. And I think the one thing that I have really taken from the meditative practice for me is, in the beginning, I was convinced that meditation was directly connected to spirituality, where the people that do it, it's like we had talked earlier, like the rhetoric, the spiritual rhetoric, like I just really dislike it. Like, you know, you got to be here now. You got to, you know, all the words, the catchphrases that come into it, I find difficult.
Yeah.
And so when I first started doing meditation, you know, maybe 10 years ago, I was like, oh, I can't do this. It's like I'm too scattered. I'm incapable of it. And I had taken classes and I had gone through it, and it always came back to the like, well, you know, your guru and all this stuff. And I was just like, God, I don't like it. So the turning point came where I was investigating different types of meditation, just for the sake of like my anxiety. I'm like a high anxiety guy. And I stumbled upon this thing on the internet that described meditation in a way that changed everything for me. And it was, if you view your meditation as a goal, if you're a goal-oriented person and your objective through meditation is spiritual transcendence, like if your goal for this is to become enlightened, you're going to have a real rough time.
Yeah.
However, if you view it as in a similar way to, as you get older, your muscles need to be exercised purely because if you don't, they atrophy. You know, your testosterone changes. So as opposed to lifting weights with the goal of becoming, you know,
Jacked.
Duke Fuckington or whatever, you know what I mean? It's like I'm doing this because it's good for me, and I like that my body functions in a way it allows me to do all these things that I like.
Right.
If you view meditation as being the same process for those of us who overthink, which I tend to do, then the process becomes less about I'm trying to become enlightened and more about, for 40 minutes in the morning, I have an exercise for my mind that consciously I recognize when I've strayed from my breath, recognize that failure, if you want to look at it that way, is not something that, as somebody who's such a perfectionist, I should be critical of myself for. And then gently draw yourself back to your focus. Then the process becomes more like fail, start again. Fail, start again. Fail, start again. And every time you start again, there's an element of forgiveness in that. And then after 40 minutes, you get up. There's no objective. It's like doing reps for overthinking. And with that, the transformation on an improvisation level for me has been monumental because I think with this sort of people pleasing or I have to be perfect. I was the child that was had expectations on me.
Right.
With that comes a reticence to improvise because there's a sense that but what if I fuck up? Mm-hmm. And when people say, give us one piece of advice for beginning musicians, it's exactly the same as the meditative process in my mind, in that you need to learn to fail efficiently. And by efficiently, I mean without being, I'm terrible. I'm a piece of shit.
Right.
I should be better than this. And that piece of advice that I found from the meditative practice has allowed me for 40 minutes in the morning to exercise the part of my brain that overthinks. So
I love it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's part of what I get out of meditation is it's quite literally the thing that doesn't have a real purpose to me in the sense that I'm not trying to get anywhere with it. It's just a nice interval. It's like there's so much chaos and craziness in my life, and here's some time that I can. It is a bit of an exercise, right? Because you're kind of returning to the breath, or your mantra or whatever. But I find that in that process of just having one simple thing to return to, and it's not even in the moment so much that I'm excited about any of it. It's just a thing that I notice as I get up, as I leave from that space, from that stillness, that I'm just so much more clear or calmer about
Totally
the next thing. And it's just like you put a space between songs on the record, and sometimes it's a little bit longer because that space needs to be valued in music, right? In all these different ways. If we don't have space or stillness, then we don't have the motion or the sound. We don't have the things, right? And
I'm going to throw this into the conversation.
Yeah.
You and I, because we've known each other for a long time, we can discuss meditation in terms like that. Mm-hmm. And we can look at each other and say, I relate. I agree. One thing I'll throw in that as you were speaking, I thought was important as well, or not important, but interesting, is that I think meditation is something that can benefit everybody. And I think a lot of us are not wired in the ways where that as the benefit is of enough importance to do it.
Right.
You say, okay, well, we want to be in the silence, we want to be in the moment. I think there's a lot of people that could benefit from meditation that think, I don't care. So the same way with that guy who does, the wrestler that does the yoga. What's his name? The DP yoga.
I should know that.
Anyway, he's like a wrestler, and he does this thing, and is it yoga in the terms of what they're doing in India? No, it's not. However, the principles of it, because he's explaining it in a way that the benefits of it have a tangible outcome for people that need that, but maybe are turned off by what yoga actually is.
Right.
Allows people to participate in a way that you're just like, I'm getting the benefits on some level of this because I'm not turned off by the rhetoric.
Right.
And I think in a similar way, the idea of expressing meditation as an exercise, even though fundamentally having it viewed as an exercise puts a goal on it, for sure.
Sure.
But for people that really need it, I think that if it's explained look, if you want a goal, here's your goal. You think too much. Maybe you've admitted it to me. Maybe you're aware enough that you say, hey, I'm spinning in circles every time these situations come up. I think if you can, and this is why that explanation of it really worked for me, is because up to that point, it was so vague what the experience was because it was wrapped up in the,
in spiritual speak.
Got to be one and in the moment. And I'm just kind of like, but what? It seems like a lot of effort to be involved with that.
Oh, it's so much effort.
But to say somebody, you think too much. This is a tangible way for you to help that. It will affect your life in this way, and this way. For me, because regardless of what the I needed that. I needed to be told this is the reason why it will do it for you. I don't have the patience to engage in like, the being in the moment thing, but I really know I think too much.
Yeah.
So I guess that's my point with why that was important to me.
That's a great way to look at it too, because I remember early on trying to meditate, and I thought, and I think it's a misconception that you're trying to clear your mind, and it's like, what inevitably happens is the thoughts keep coming, they keep coming, and somebody had told me, said, oh, well, like, really, it's about this exposing that you think too much, right? Number one. And it's not necessarily about trying to rid your mind of all the thoughts, but just notice when you've deviated from the breath, and when new thoughts come in, like, you can either just return to the breath or follow them to their completion in a way, right? So that you can kind of almost exhaust them and then return to the breath.
I think the thing that I got lost with the instructions of return to the breath was no one had told me that the way for me to return to the breath was to forgive myself for straying from it. It seemed like like something that maybe if you've been doing it for a while, you'd be like, oh, of course, you forgive yourself. But for me,
it's a big deal.
It was the thing. Because I find that the process of self-actualization, and wherever I get to that in my lifetime, whether or not I get 2% there or 200% there,
sure.
The process of that, everything is intrinsically connected, from what I can tell. And the method of returning to my breath required me to learn how to forgive myself for straying. And it took me a long time to find the methodology from somebody who articulated that. It just seemed like people like, oh, just return to your breath. And I'm like, yeah, but oh my God. Okay, just return to your breath. But every time I strayed, I was like, why can't I do this? What's wrong with me? Why am I thinking about cows or whatever, And part of that process, I and this is a hard one, man, is someone, I forget where I read it, but they said every morning when you wake up, look at yourself in the mirror, look in your eyes and say, I love you. And that process, which I started, kick-started something that really helped that returning to my breath. And even now when I say it and I look at myself in the mirror and I look at my eyes and I say, Devin, I love you, my eyes are just like, oh no, fuck you. Why? What the fuck's wrong with you?
That's big work.
Yeah, but I think it's all connected. And I think that take on a tangible level, I want to learn to be more free in my writing of metal, to be able to like really rip.
Yeah.
Okay, well, how do you do that? Well, you have to be clear enough of your own judgment that if you write a riff that seems weird, you don't go, oh, that sucks, and stop. You just let it rip. Yeah. And I think that the process of self-forgiveness for something as benign seeming as like straying from your breath is the exact way that can be like influenced.
This is really good insight. I had not brought forgiveness as a concept into meditation, but you're uncovering something for me in this moment, like that I feel like is crucial.
The foundation.
Yeah, especially for listeners that are new to this process of trying to uncover self along the way of self-discovery and everything. Like forgiveness and begin again. That's
what the process. That's what was so fascinating about it. It's like that's what it said. The process is not about anything other than fail, forgive yourself, start again. Fail, forgive yourself, start again. Fail, forgive yourself, start for 40 minutes, and then get up and do your day.
Yeah.
And every day, and it's funny. It's like, and that's why I equate it to lifting weights.
I can see that
because after a while, your muscles acclimatize to it.
Right.
And I think that the pattern-oriented creatures that we are, the more you say to yourself, it's okay, start again, it's okay, start again, then when you're in a conflict situation, or you're on stage where you're, hecklers, or you're doing some sort of banter, or you go south, or you say something that's stupid, and then it's the same mechanism that you're training that goes, it's okay, start again, forget it.
Yep.
You know?
That's probably best advice. I mean, I have I know that this is a world of everybody's trying to perform and have their 5 minutes of fame on social media or whatever, and there's a lot of negative self-talk and like people wanting to perform for others and everything. And so this is like maybe some of the most, crucial street level advice I could even imagine giving any human beings. Like you're saying, like everybody could benefit.
That's it.
Yeah.
But I think because it's been wrapped up in the gauze of spirituality, I think there's a certain practical application of it that has been lost.
The technique
of just, look, this is a method to get over the judgment that every step of our day has, like I'm going to have a donut. Oh, I shouldn't have a donut. Oh, I'm a piece of shit because I'm going to have the donut. Or, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like, I think it's by exercising practically that mechanism, it becomes easier to say, oh, I'll have the donut, sure. You know what I mean? It's like, and then maybe the next day, because you weren't so, I'm a bad boy, I shouldn't have the donut, you look at it and you just be like,
I did that.
I did it.
it.
I'm good.
Yep.
And that was the same thing with like eating meat or, or doing drugs or drinking or anything that now when, vegetarian or vegan or whichever way, try to be vegan as much as I can, but, sometimes it's hard on tour and cheese is in fucking everything.
Yeah.
But now my reasons for doing that are based in like practical experience. It's not like, man, I wish I could have like eaten a horse's ass, but I never did, right?
Right.
And then you eat a horse's ass, and you're like, "Oh, I was a horse's ass, man. I
Interesting.
really wish I hadn't eaten that horse's ass. He was a nice horse, right?"
Yeah, I ate a pig's heart once.
Did you?
Yeah.
Did you?
It was a pig strummy sandwich.
Oh my God, what a great name!
Pig strum. Yeah. I was like, yeah, it wasn't that great.
Well, but you tried.
But I did.
Yeah.
I was like, this makes me kind of want to be vegan right now.
Well, see?
It's gross.
So you're talking about with LA, man. Like after a while, it's like you're just by experiencing it. Like, okay, let's never do that again.
Yeah, we're good on that.
Yeah.
Thanks, LA, for showing me.
However, I do like the idea of you taking the pig's heart out, like that Indiana Jones scene where he reaches into the guy's chest and pulls it out, and then just putting it on a Kaiser bun, eating it, and then being like, well vegan.
Yeah. Done. Vegan now. Well,
I gotta pee.
Yeah,
so bad.
Dude, thank you so much for taking the time.
Thanks for driving me out from San Diego.
You got it, dude. Anytime.
Right on, brother.
I'll drive Miss Debbie.
Woo.
Love you, man.
Diet driving Miss Debbie. All right, I'm going pee now.
All
See
right.
you guys
later.
Players Pick Podcast, Picks and Perspective with Chris Johnson. Pool table.
This episode of Players Pick Podcast brought to you by our good friends at Jim Dunlop Guitar Products, Kiesel Custom Guitars, Mackie Headphones and Mixers. Sound design by Drew of the Drew. Intro and outro voiceovers by the amazing Mini Joe. Until next time.